What happens when a billionaire realizes money can't buy what matters most? On a crowded New York subway, a single act of kindness between two strangers will shatter everything they thought they knew about power, worth, and survival. He's a single father barely holding his world together. She's a woman who controls empires but can't control the emptiness inside. One simple gesture on a Tuesday morning will set off a chain reaction that threatens to destroy them both or save them. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The 6:47 a.m. train was already packed when Daniel Hayes stepped through the sliding doors at 125th Street, his daughter Mia's small hand gripped tight in his own. The car smelled like coffee, wet coats, and that particular blend of human exhaustion that only existed during New York rush hour. Bodies pressed together, strangers avoiding eye contact, everyone locked into their own private worlds of worry and routine. Daniel felt Mia's fingers squeeze tighter as the crowd shifted. She was 7 now, old enough to understand that mornings were hard, that money was tight, that daddy was always tired. Old enough to not complain anymore when breakfast was cereal again, when her winter coat from last year didn't quite fit right, when he forgot to sign her permission slip because he'd worked a double shift. Too young to remember her mother's voice. "You okay, Bug?" Daniel asked, shifting his messenger bag higher on his shoulder. The strap was fraying. He'd noticed it yesterday. Another thing that needed fixing, another expense he didn't have room for. Mia nodded, her dark curls bouncing. She was wearing the purple backpack she'd picked out herself at the Goodwill, slightly too big for her frame, but she'd loved it the moment she saw it. That was one of the things that killed him, how little it took to make her happy, how grateful she was for things other kids wouldn't even notice. The train lurched forward, and Daniel grabbed the overhead bar with his free hand, steadying them both. Through the window, Harlem blurred past, brownstones and corner stores, laundromats and churches, the whole beautiful mess of the neighborhood he'd grown up in and never quite managed to leave. Not that he was complaining. This was home. This was real. He just wished real came with health insurance and a savings account that had more than $200 in it. "Daddy, your phone's buzzing," Mia said, tugging at his jacket. Daniel glanced down. A text from Marcus, his supervisor at the construction site. "Running behind. Might need you to start without me. Keys in the usual spot." Great. Which meant he'd need to drop Mia off at school even earlier, sprint to the site in Red Hook, and pray the Q train didn't decide today was the day to have signal problems. He'd already used up his warnings about being late. One more and Rick would find someone else, someone without a kid, someone who could work overtime without needing to coordinate pickup schedules with Mrs. Chen next door. Someone more convenient. Daniel typed back a quick thumbs-up emoji and shoved the phone in his pocket. Beside him, an older man in a security guard uniform dozed against the pole, his head bobbing with each jolt of the train. Across the aisle, a college kid had earbuds in, staring at nothing, lost in whatever world her music created. A woman in scrubs, night shift nurse probably, stood near the doors with her eyes closed, swaying slightly. Everyone fighting their own version of tired. The train pulled into 96th Street. Doors opened. Bodies shuffled. A few people got off, but twice as many pushed their way on, and suddenly the space that had been tight became suffocating. Daniel pulled Mia closer, making sure nobody stepped on her. "I got you," he murmured. She looked up at him with those huge brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, and smiled. "I know." Something in his chest cracked a little. 3 years since the accident, and there were still moments when the absence hit him like a physical thing. Sarah should have been here. Should have been the one doing drop-off while he headed to work. Should have been planning Mia's 8th birthday party, arguing with him about whether they could afford dance classes, stealing the last of the coffee in the morning. Should have been alive. But she wasn't. And standing around wishing things were different didn't pay the rent or keep Mia fed or make sure she had a father who showed up, even when showing up felt impossible. So Daniel did what he always did. He pushed the grief down into that locked place inside him, the place where he kept everything he couldn't afford to feel during daylight hours, and focused on the next task. Get Mia to school. Get to the site. Frame out the wall Marcus had started yesterday. Don't think about how his back ached or how he'd skipped breakfast because there were only 2 eggs left and Mia needed them more. Don't think, just move. The train rocked around a curve, and someone's shoulder jammed into his ribs. He shifted, trying to give Mia more room. The The car was so packed now that he could barely move his arms. The air felt thick, recycled, too warm despite the February cold outside. At 72nd Street, the doors opened again. And that's when he saw her. She was standing on the platform, just outside the door, mid-30s maybe, wearing a long black coat that probably cost more than Daniel made in a month. Dark hair pulled back, skin pale, eyes that looked hollow. There was something about the way she stood, perfectly still in the chaos of the platform, that made her stand out. Like she was there, but not there. Present, but absent. Like she was barely holding herself together and desperately hoping nobody noticed. The crowd pushed forward, and she stepped into the car. There were no seats available. There hadn't been seats available since 145th Street. But Daniel watched as she gripped the pole near the door, her knuckles going white. She didn't look at anyone. Didn't acknowledge the businessman who bumped into her or the teenager whose backpack hit her arm. She just stood there, staring at nothing, and Daniel recognized the look because he'd worn it himself plenty of times. The look of someone barely surviving. The train started moving again. Mia shifted against his leg, adjusting her backpack. The woman in the black coat swayed slightly as the car picked up speed, and for a second Daniel thought she might fall. Her eyes fluttered closed. Her grip on the pole tightened. Nobody else seemed to notice. But Daniel noticed. He always noticed. It was a habit he'd developed over the years, maybe from being a father, maybe from being someone who'd needed help himself and remembered every person who'd looked away. The small kindnesses mattered. The moments when someone saw you, really saw you, mattered more than any big gesture. He glanced around the car. The nurse was still swaying with her eyes closed. The security guard was snoring now. A businessman in a suit sat near the window, scrolling through his phone. Another seat was occupied by a younger guy with a gym bag, headphones in, oblivious. Daniel looked down at Mia. "Hey, Bug, can you hold on to my bag for a second?" "Okay," she said, taking the messenger bag strap. He caught the eye of the guy with the gym bag and gestured toward the woman. "Excuse me, would you mind giving up your seat? She looks like she needs it." The guy glanced up, pulled out one earbud. "What?" "The lady," Daniel said, nodding toward the woman in the black coat. "She doesn't look well. Could you—" "I got here first, man." The guy put his earbud back in. Daniel felt a flash of irritation, but swallowed it. "Fine." He turned to the businessman. "Sir, would you be willing to—" The businessman didn't even look up from his phone. The train rattled through a dark section of tunnel. The woman's face had gone even paler. Her breathing looked shallow. Daniel made a decision. "Miss," he said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise, "you can take my spot." She blinked, focusing on him for the first time. Up close, her eyes were gray-green, and there were shadows under them that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "I'm sorry. I'm getting off in a few stops anyway," Daniel lied. "You should sit. I'm fine." "You don't look fine." He said it gently, without judgment, just a fact. Her mouth opened, closed. She glanced around the car as if expecting someone to intervene, to tell this stranger to mind his own business, but nobody was paying attention. Nobody cared. "Please," Daniel said. "It's not a big deal." Something in her expression shifted. Not gratitude exactly, more like confusion mixed with something that might have been pain. She looked at him like he'd just spoken a language she'd forgotten existed. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." Daniel guided Mia slightly to the side and let go of the overhead bar. The woman moved past him, unsteady, and lowered herself into the space he'd vacated. She sat down carefully, like her body hurt, and for a moment she just stared at her hands. Daniel grabbed the pole she'd been holding and positioned himself so Mia was protected from the worst of the crowd. The train swayed. His legs absorbed the motion automatically. Years of riding these trains had taught his body the rhythm. "That was nice, Daddy," Mia said quietly. "Just being a decent human, Bug." But when he glanced back at the woman, she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not gratitude. Not exactly. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like recognition, as if in that small gesture he'd confirmed something she'd been afraid to believe. Then she turned away, and the moment passed. The train pulled into 59th Street, Columbus Circle. The automated voice announced the station, and the doors slid open. A fresh wave of commuters pushed in, and Daniel lost sight of the woman entirely in the shuffle of bodies. "Come on, Bug," he said, taking Mia's hand again. "Our stop's next." They rode in silence the rest of the way, wedged between a group of tourists arguing over directions and a delivery guy with a cart full of packages. Daniel's mind was already on the day ahead: drop-off, site work, picking Mia up by 3:15, getting dinner started, helping with homework, bedtime routine. The same cycle he'd been running for 3 years, day after day, just trying to keep his head above water. The woman on the train was already fading from his thoughts. He had no way of knowing she'd remember him for the rest of her life. Elena Voss stepped off the train at 42nd Street and stood on the platform as the crowd flowed around her like water around a stone. Her legs felt shaky, her chest was tight. She'd barely slept in 4 days, not since the funeral, not since she'd signed the papers that made her the sole owner of everything her mother had built. Voss Capital, $12 billion in assets, offices in 6 countries, power that most people couldn't even imagine, and she'd never felt more empty. Elena forced herself to move, following the crowd up the stairs and into the main terminal. Grand Central at rush hour was a river of humanity. Thousands of people rushing to catch trains, grab coffee, make meetings. Everyone moving with purpose. Everyone belonging somewhere. She stopped in the middle of the floor, surrounded by motion, and felt completely still inside. The man on the train had looked at her. That was the thing she couldn't shake. Not the seat, though that had been kind, but the way he'd looked at her, like she was a person. Not Elena Voss, not the name in Forbes, not the woman who'd inherited an empire. Just someone who needed help. When was the last time that had happened? She couldn't remember. Her phone buzzed. Elena pulled it from her coat pocket. 17 missed calls, 32 emails, all flagged urgent. Her assistant had sent 3 increasingly frantic texts about the board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m., the merger with Castellan Group, the quarterly reports, the investors who wanted answers about the transition plan. All of it felt like noise. Elena slipped the phone back in her pocket without responding and walked toward the exit. Outside, the February air bit at her face, sharp and cold. The city was awake and roaring, taxis honking, construction crews jackhammering, someone on the corner selling hot pretzels from a cart that smelled like salt and steam. Normal life. Regular chaos. She could buy any of it, all of it. She could buy the pretzel cart, the building behind it, the entire block if she wanted. Money had never been the problem. Money had never been anything but a problem. Her town car was waiting at the curb, idling. Robert, her driver, saw her coming and moved to open the door, but Elena waved him off. "I'm going to walk." "Ma'am, you have the board meeting in 40 minutes. Tell them I'll be late." "Ms. Voss, tell them I'll be late, Robert." She walked. Not toward the office. Not toward anywhere in particular. She just moved through the morning rush, letting the crowd carry her north on Lexington. Past the coffee shops packed with people grabbing breakfast. Past the boutiques that wouldn't open for another 2 hours. Past the doormen standing outside luxury buildings, greeting residents who didn't notice them. Elena's mother had built Voss Capital from nothing. Literally nothing. A single mortgage loan in 1984. Leveraged and flipped until it became 2 loans, then 4, then a portfolio, then an empire. Catherine Voss had been brilliant, ruthless, and completely incapable of showing affection to her only daughter. "Weakness is expensive," she used to say. "Sentiment is for people who can't afford better." Elena had learned those lessons well. She'd gone to Wharton, graduated top of her class, spent her 20s making deals that made other people rich while she got richer. She'd absorbed her mother's worldview like gospel. Trust no one, need no one, control everything. And then, 3 weeks ago, Catherine Voss had a stroke at her desk and died before the ambulance arrived. 71 years old, $12 billion, alone in her office. The funeral had been attended by hundreds, politicians, CEOs, celebrities who'd wanted to be seen paying respects. Not one of them had known Catherine. Not really. They'd known her reputation, her influence, her ability to make or destroy careers with a single phone call. But they hadn't known the woman who'd raised a daughter to believe love was a liability. Elena stopped walking. She was standing in front of a small playground, watching a young mother push a toddler on a swing. The kid was laughing, that pure, unselfconscious sound children made before the world taught them to be careful. The mother was smiling, saying something Elena couldn't hear, and for a moment everything in the scene looked impossibly simple. love without transaction, joy without cost. When was the last time Elena had felt that? She thought about the man on the train again. The way he'd protected his daughter, kept her close. The way he'd given up his seat without expecting anything in return. No angle, no leverage, just kindness. It had been such a small thing. So why did it feel like it had cracked something open inside her? Elena's phone buzzed again. This time she answered. What? Where are you? Her assistant, James, sounded stressed. The board's waiting. Patterson's threatening to call a vote on the merger without you if... Let him. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm sorry. What? Let him call the vote. I'll deal with it later. Elena, you can't just... I can do whatever I want, James. That's the point of owning the company. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. Elena stared at the phone in her palm, the device that connected her to everything she supposedly controlled, and felt nothing but exhaustion. She'd spent her entire life doing exactly what her mother had trained her to do. Win, accumulate, dominate. And she had won. She was worth more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. She had influence that reached into boardrooms and government offices across the globe. She had everything. Except she had nothing. The realization hit her with the force of something that had been building for years and had finally reached critical mass. She had no friends, only employees and business associates. She had no family, only lawyers and accountants managing the estate. She had no purpose beyond maintaining systems her mother had built. She had spent 30 years becoming exactly what Catherine Voss wanted her to be. And it was killing her. Elena turned away from the playground and started walking again, faster now. The board meeting didn't matter. The merger didn't matter. None of it mattered because all of it was just more of the same. More money, more power, more emptiness dressed up as success. What mattered was the man on the train. Not because he was special, not because one act of kindness had magically fixed anything, but because he'd reminded her of something she'd forgotten. There were people in the world who still operated on a different set of rules. People who helped strangers. People who gave without calculating the return. People who were decent just because decency mattered. Elena wanted to find him. Wanted to... what? Thank him. Repay him. Understand him. She didn't know. She just knew that something in that 30-second interaction had mattered more than anything in her calendar for the next month. And if she let it slip away, if she went back to the office and the meetings and the endless cycle of accumulation, she might never get another chance to figure out why. Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it. Instead, she turned around and headed back toward Grand Central, back toward the 6th train, back toward the place where, for just a moment, someone had seen her as human. She had no plan, no strategy, just a feeling that if she could find that man again, if she could understand how someone with so little could still have so much, maybe she could learn how to be a person again. Daniel made it to the construction site with 3 minutes to spare. The job was in Red Hook, a half-finished condo conversion that had been delayed twice already due to permitting issues. Marcus was already there, looking irritated, and Daniel jogged the last 50 feet to the entrance. "Sorry, man. Train was packed." Marcus grunted. "You're here. That's what matters. We need to finish framing the 3rd floor today, or Rick's gonna lose his mind." On it. Daniel grabbed his tool belt from his locker and headed upstairs. The building still had that raw construction smell, sawdust and drywall compound and fresh lumber. Winter light filtered through the windows, cold and gray. His breath fogged in the unheated space. He liked this work. There was something honest about it. You showed up, you built things, you could see the progress at the end of each day. No politics, no games, just measurements and materials and the satisfaction of watching something take shape. Plus, it paid better than most of the other jobs he was qualified for. Not great, but enough to keep the lights on and Mia fed. Enough to pretend they were doing okay. By 10 a.m., Daniel had fallen into the rhythm. Measure, cut, nail, repeat. His mind went quiet, focused on the work. This was the other thing he liked about construction. It didn't leave room for thinking about all the ways he was barely holding things together. "Hayes!" Daniel looked up. Rick, the site manager, was standing at the top of the stairs, clipboard in hand. "Yeah? Got a minute?" "Shh." Daniel set down his hammer and walked over. Rick was in his 50s, former Marine, the kind of guy who ran a tight ship but treated his crew fairly. What's up? You logged 42 hours last week. Yeah. Daniel waited, not sure where this was going. And you turned down overtime on Friday. Had to pick up my daughter. Rick nodded slowly. Look, I'm not trying to get in your business, but you need more hours? Because I can't give you full-time with benefits, you know that. Union rules, budget constraints, all that. But if you need more work, I can probably find it. Daniel hesitated. He did need more hours. He always needed more hours. But more hours meant less time with Mia, and he was already stretched so thin that he felt like a ghost in his own life, present, but not really there. I appreciate it, Daniel said carefully. Let me think about it. Fair enough. Rick started to turn away, then stopped. You're a good worker, Hayes. Reliable. That matters. Don't forget that. Thanks. After Rick left, Daniel stood there for a moment, staring at the unfinished wall in front of him. 42 hours. And he was still behind on the electric bill, still putting off the dentist appointment Mia needed, still buying the cheapest groceries and hoping they'd stretch. How did people do this? How did anyone make it work? He thought about Sarah. If she were here, she'd tell him to stop catastrophizing, to focus on today and let tomorrow worry about itself. She'd been good at that, living in the moment, finding joy in small things. She'd made poverty feel like an adventure instead of a prison. But Sarah wasn't here, and Daniel didn't know how to make struggling feel like anything other than what it was, exhausting. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Mia's school called. She forgot her lunch. I can drop it off if you want. Daniel closed his eyes. He'd packed her lunch this morning. He was sure he had. But then he'd been rushing, trying to catch the train, and he must have left it on the counter. Another failure. Another thing he'd forgotten because his brain was too full of everything else. He texted back, "That would be great. Thank you so much. I'll pay you back." Mrs. Chen replied immediately, "Don't be silly. It's just lunch." But it wasn't just lunch. It was another debt. Another reminder that he couldn't do this alone. Another crack in the facade of competence he was trying so hard to maintain. Daniel shoved the phone back in his pocket and picked up his hammer. Measure, cut, nail, repeat. Don't think, just work. By the time Daniel picked Mia up at 3:15, the sky had turned that particular shade of winter gray that promised snow but never delivered. She came running out of the school building with her too big backpack bouncing, and despite everything, Daniel felt his chest loosen. This was what mattered. How was school, Bug? Good. We learned about fractions. Mrs. Patterson says I'm really good at them. That's because you're smart. And Mrs. Chen brought me lunch. She made dumplings. Mia looked up at him seriously. I saved you one. Daniel's throat tightened. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. You always share with me. They walked toward the subway, Mia chattering about her day, and Daniel listened with half his attention while the other half calculated whether they had enough eggs for dinner or if he needed to stop at the bodega. They had milk, bread, maybe some pasta left. He could make that work. The train ride home was less crowded than the morning rush. They got seats this time, and Mia pulled out her homework while Daniel stared out the window at the city sliding past. Sometimes he wondered what his life would look like if he'd made different choices. If he'd finished college instead of dropping out when Sarah got pregnant. If he'd taken that job in Boston his cousin had offered, even though it meant leaving everything he knew. If Sarah hadn't been in the car that night. But those thoughts didn't help anything. The past was fixed. The only direction was forward. They got off at 125th and walked the 4 blocks to their building. A pre-war walk-up that had seen better decades. The heat was inconsistent. The hallways smelled like cooking and old carpet. But the rent was manageable, and their neighbors were decent. Daniel unlocked the apartment door and stepped into the familiar space. Small, cramped. The furniture was mostly secondhand, the paint was peeling in the corners, but Mia's drawings covered the refrigerator and her books were stacked neatly on the shelf, and it was theirs. Homework first, then you can watch TV, Daniel said, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. Can I have a snack? Apple or crackers? Both? Daniel smiled. Both. While Mia worked on her math problems at the kitchen table, Daniel started dinner. Pasta with butter and garlic. Simple. Cheap. Mia never complained. She ate what he made and said thank you and told him it was good, even when they both knew it was just fuel. His phone rang as he was draining the pasta. Unknown number. Probably spam, but Daniel answered anyway. Hello? Is this Daniel Hayes? A woman's voice, professional. Yeah, who's this? My name is Jessica Lynn. I'm calling from St. Catherine's Hospital regarding an outstanding balance. Daniel's stomach dropped. I've been making payments. Yes, sir, I see that. But the account is currently 60 days past due on the remaining balance. We need to discuss a payment plan for the... I'm paying what I can, Daniel said, trying to keep his voice level. Mia looked up from her homework, and he turned away so she wouldn't see his face. I can't give you more than I have. I understand that, Mr. Hayes, but the hospital has policies. The hospital has my money, every month. Whatever's left after rent and food, you get. That's all I can do. There was a pause. Sir, if you could just... I have to go. I'm making dinner for my daughter. Daniel hung up before she could respond. His hands were shaking. The hospital bill, from Mia's broken arm last year, was sitting at $4,800 even after insurance. He was paying $100 a month, which apparently wasn't enough, but it was all he had. What did they want from him? Blood? Daddy? Daniel took a breath and turned around. Mia was watching him with those two perceptive eyes. Yeah, Bug? Is everything okay? Everything's fine. Just a boring grown-up call? He forced a smile. Pasta's ready. You hungry? They ate dinner. Daniel asked about fractions and listened to Mia explain what she'd learned, and for a little while the weight lifted. This was enough. This moment, this conversation, this small space of normalcy. This had to be enough. After dinner, after homework, after Mia's bath and the bedtime routine, Daniel finally collapsed on the couch. It was only 8:30, but he felt like he'd been awake for days. The TV was on, some rerun of a show he wasn't really watching, and the apartment was quiet except for the radiator clanking and the distant sound of someone's music thumping through the walls. He thought about the woman on the train that morning, wondered if she'd made it wherever she was going, wondered if she was okay. Probably fine. People like that, people who wore expensive coats and had that polished look, they didn't stay down for long. They had resources, support systems, options. Unlike Daniel, who had a maxed-out credit card, an eviction notice he was trying to fight, and a daughter who deserved better than scrambling every month just to survive. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd get up and do it all again. There wasn't another choice. That's what being a parent meant. You kept going even when going felt impossible. You kept going because someone was depending on you. You kept going because love, real love, didn't have an off switch. And somewhere in the back of his mind, in that place where he kept the grief and the fear and all the things he couldn't afford to feel during daylight, Daniel wondered if anyone had ever depended on that woman from the train. He wondered if anyone had ever loved her enough to give up a seat. He wondered if she was as alone as she'd looked. Then he stopped wondering and let the exhaustion pull him under. Because tomorrow was coming whether he was ready or not, and he had to be ready. He always had to be ready. Elena didn't go to the office for 3 days. On the first day, James called 14 times. On the second, the board sent a formal letter requesting her presence at an emergency meeting. On the third, her lawyer showed up at her apartment with a briefcase full of documents that apparently needed her signature immediately. She signed them without reading and sent him away. Instead, she rode the subway. The same route, the same time, looking for a man whose name she didn't know and whose face was already getting fuzzy in her memory. Brown hair, maybe? Average height? He'd been wearing a work jacket, she thought, or had it been a hoodie? The details kept slipping away, but the feeling didn't. That moment when he'd looked at her, really looked, stayed sharp. By Thursday, Elena knew she was being ridiculous. New York had 8 million people. The odds of finding one random commuter were astronomical. She should have been at the office dealing with the Castellan merger, not haunting subway platforms like some kind of ghost. But she kept riding anyway. Friday morning, she was standing on the platform at 72nd Street when her phone rang. Not James this time, her mother's lawyer, Gerald Hutchins. Elena, we need to talk about the foundation. She'd forgotten about the foundation. Catherine Voss had established it 15 years ago, tax purposes mostly, though the PR team had spun it as philanthropy. $100 million in assets, carefully managed to generate positive press while minimizing actual impact. What about it? The annual gala is in 6 weeks. You're expected to speak, and we need to finalize the grant allocations. Give it all away. Silence. I'm sorry? The grants. Whatever organizations applied, fund them all. The full amounts they requested. Elena, that's not how this works. We have a vetting process, strategic priorities. I don't care. Just do it. She hung up and boarded the train. The car was moderately crowded. Nothing like Monday's crush, but enough bodies that standing room was limited. Elena found a spot near the door and watched the familiar stations slide past. 59th, 51st, Grand Central. She was about to give up and get off when she saw him. Same work jacket, same messenger bag. This time no daughter, but the way he stood, protective even of empty space, aware of everyone around him, was unmistakable. Elena's heart started hammering. He was 3 feet away, holding the overhead bar, staring at nothing with that same exhausted expression she'd seen before. Up close, in better light, she could see the details she'd missed. The fraying cuff of his jacket, the scuff marks on his boots, the shadow of stubble that said he'd probably skipped shaving to save time. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than missed sleep. Before she could talk herself out of it, Elena moved closer. Excuse me. He glanced over, polite but wary. Yeah? The word stuck. What was she supposed to say? You gave me your seat 4 days ago, and I've been obsessing about it ever since? I think we were on the same train earlier this week. Recognition flickered. Monday morning? Yes. Elena felt absurdly relieved that he remembered. You gave up your seat for me. Oh, right. He shifted his grip on the bar. You feeling better? I'm fine. I wanted to thank you. No need, it wasn't a big deal. It was to me. The train lurched around a curve and they both swayed with the motion. A businessman pushed past, jostling Elena's shoulder, and Daniel automatically shifted to give her more space. The gesture was so unconscious, so ingrained, that Elena doubted he even noticed doing it. Look, she said, I'd like to buy you coffee. Or lunch. To say thank you properly. He looked uncomfortable. That's really not necessary. I know it's not necessary. I want to. I appreciate it, but I'm good. The train was slowing for 42nd Street. Daniel moved toward the door, clearly planning to exit, and Elena felt a surge of panic. If she let him leave now, she'd never find him again. Please, she said, just coffee, 20 minutes. He stopped, turned back, studied her face like he was trying to figure out what she wanted. Why? Because you helped me when nobody else did. Because that mattered. I gave you a seat on the subway. People do that every day. No, Elena said quietly. They really don't. Something in her tone must have landed because his expression softened slightly. The doors opened. People flowed out around them. Daniel hesitated, then sighed. There's a diner 2 blocks from here. I've got 30 minutes before I need to be at work. Elena felt a ridiculous surge of triumph. That's perfect. They exited at Grand Central and walked in silence through the morning crowd. The diner was exactly what Elena expected. Cracked vinyl booths, laminate tables, coffee that smelled like it had been sitting too long. They slid into a booth near the window, and a waitress appeared immediately with a pot. Coffee, hun? Please, Daniel said. Same, Elena added. The waitress poured and disappeared. Daniel wrapped his hands around the mug like he was trying to absorb the warmth. Outside, the city rushed past, people in suits, delivery trucks, someone pushing a cart full of flowers. So, Daniel said, coffee. Elena realized she hadn't actually planned this conversation beyond getting him to agree. I'm Elena. Daniel. He took a sip. You work around here? Midtown. Finance. It wasn't technically a lie, but it felt like one. You? Construction. Red Hook, mostly. Whatever jobs Rick's got lined up. You like it? Daniel shrugged. It pays. I'm good at it. That's enough. The answer was so matter-of-fact, so devoid of ambition or complaint, that Elena didn't know how to respond. Everyone she knew talked about their work like it defined them, like their job title was inseparable from their identity. Your daughter, Elena said. She was with you Monday. His face changed, warmed in a way that made him look younger. Mia? Yeah. She seems sweet. She's the best thing in my life. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious fact in the world. Elena took a sip of coffee to cover the unexpected emotion that rose in her throat. How old is she? 7, second grade. Obsessed with fractions right now, which is hilarious because I barely made it through high school math. And her mother? The warmth disappeared. Died 3 years ago. Car accident. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Daniel stared into his coffee. What about you? Family? My mother passed recently. No siblings. No... She trailed off. No husband, no children, no one who'd notice if she disappeared tomorrow. Just me. I'm sorry about your mom. Don't be. We weren't close. Daniel looked up at that, something unreadable in his expression. Still, losing a parent is hard. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to explain that Catherine Voss had been more corporation than mother, more boss than parent. But Daniel was looking at her with genuine sympathy, and contradicting him felt cruel. It's complicated, she said instead. Family usually is. They sat in silence for a moment. The diner sounds filled the space, dishes clattering, conversations blending together, the hiss of the griddle. Normal sounds, regular life. Elena cleared her throat. I wanted to ask you something. When you gave me that seat, why did you do it? Daniel frowned. You looked like you needed it. But you needed it too. You were standing the whole way with your daughter. So? So why give it up? He seemed genuinely confused by the question. Because you needed it more in that moment, and I could handle standing. That simple? Yeah. Daniel checked his watch, and Elena saw the crack in the crystal. Is there something else you wanted to talk about? Because I really do need to get to work. I want to help you. The words came out before Elena could stop them. Daniel's expression went carefully neutral. Help me how? I don't know. Money? A better job? Whatever you need. I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's gratitude. For giving you a seat on the train? That's insane. Daniel started sliding out of the booth. Look, I appreciate the coffee, but... Wait. Elena reached across the table, stopping just short of touching his hand. Please, I'm saying this badly. You're saying it fine. The answer's just no. Why? Because I don't take handouts. Because I work for what I have. Because my daughter's watching everything I do. And I need her to see that you earn things. You don't just... He stopped, frustrated. You seem like a nice person, but I'm not your project. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Daniel stood. Thank you for the coffee. Good luck with whatever you're dealing with. He was halfway to the door before Elena found her voice. I have $12 billion, she said loudly. Daniel stopped. Half the diner turned to look. Elena ignored them. $12 billion, she repeated, quieter now. And I can't buy a single real thing, not one moment that matters, not one connection that isn't about what I can do for someone or what they can do for me. And then you, a stranger, gave me something nobody's given me in years. Human decency, no agenda, no expectation, just kindness. Daniel walked back to the booth. He didn't sit down. So this is about you feeling guilty. This is about me not knowing how to be a person anymore. The honesty of it seemed to catch him off guard. He stood there, work jacket and scuffed boots and exhaustion, looking at her like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. I don't know what you want from me, he said finally. I don't either. Elena felt tears threatening and blinked them back. I just know that talking to you for 5 minutes has felt more real than anything in my life for the past year, and I don't want to go back to the way things were. You're a billionaire. Yes. And you're sitting in a crappy diner asking a construction worker for life advice. I guess so. Daniel almost smiled. Almost. That's the saddest thing I've heard all week. Probably the saddest thing you'll hear all month. This time he did smile. Small, but genuine. He sat back down across from her. Okay, he said. I'll bite. What exactly do you think I can teach you? Elena thought about it. How to matter. You have $12 billion. You matter. No, my money matters. My influence matters. I don't. That's bullshit. The bluntness shocked her. Excuse me? You heard me. It's bullshit. You matter because you exist. The money's just noise. Daniel leaned forward. You want to know what I think? I think you've spent so long being rich that you forgot how to be anything else. And now you're having some kind of crisis and you think finding the poor guy on the subway will fix it. That's not. It is, though. And the thing is, I can't fix you. Nobody can fix you except you. Elena felt like she'd been slapped. Then why are you still sitting here? Because I remember what it's like to feel lost. His voice softened. After Sarah died, I spent 6 months going through the motions, getting up, taking care of Mia, working, coming home. Repeat. I was there, but I wasn't there, just kind of existing. What changed? Mia asked me if I was sad. Daniel rubbed his face. She was 4 years old, and she asked if I was sad because I never smiled anymore. And I realized I was teaching her that this is what life looks like, just surviving, just getting through. What did you do? Started trying, not to be happy. I wasn't ready for that, but to be present, to show up for real, not just physically. Elena absorbed this. And that worked? Some days. Some days I still feel like I'm drowning, but at least Mia sees me fighting. That's what good parenting looks like. I don't know. I'm making it up as I go. Daniel checked his watch again. I really do have to leave. Rick will kill me if I'm late again. Can I see you again? He hesitated. Why? Because I think you're right. I need to fix myself. But I also think maybe you could show me what that looks like. Not with money, just with, she struggled for the words, with living. I don't have time to be your guru. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to let me understand how you do it, how you keep going when everything's hard. Daniel stood again, but this time he didn't look angry, just tired. You know what the secret is? There's no secret. You just get up every day and do the next thing. That's it. That can't be it. It is, though. He pulled a few crumpled bills from his pocket and dropped them on the table. For the coffee. I was going to pay. I know, but I pay my own way. Elena watched him leave, feeling something shift in her chest. Not disappointment exactly, more like recognition. He'd called her out, refused her money, and somehow made her feel more seen than anyone had in years. She sat in the booth for a long time after he left, staring at the dollars he'd left behind. 3 singles and 2 quarters, probably more than he could afford to spend. But he'd done it anyway because his dignity mattered more than convenience. Elena picked up the bills and folded them carefully into her wallet. Then she left a 50 on the table for the waitress and walked back out into the cold morning. She had no idea what she was doing, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, she actually wanted to figure it out. Not because someone told her to, not because it would look good or make money or maintain her position, because it mattered. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start with. Elena went to the office that afternoon. The board meeting had been rescheduled for 2 p.m., and she walked into the conference room exactly on time to find 12 people in expensive suits looking at her like she'd grown a second head. Ms. Voss, Patterson said, his tone dripping with barely concealed irritation. How gracious of you to join us. Let's skip the passive aggression, Richard. What do you want? We want to know what the hell you've been doing for the past week while this company falls apart. The company's fine. The Castellan merger is in jeopardy because you missed 3 critical meetings. Our largest investors are asking questions about leadership stability, and you've apparently instructed the foundation to liquidate its entire grant budget without oversight. Elena sat down at the head of the table, her mother's seat, now hers. The foundation will operate with actual generosity for once. The merger will proceed, or it won't. And the investors can relax because I'm back. That's it? That's your explanation? That's my decision. My company, remember? Patterson's face reddened. Your mother would never have... My mother's dead, Elena said it flatly, without emotion. And I'm not her. The room went silent. Elena looked around the table at the faces she'd known for years. VPs and directors and executives who'd built careers on managing Catherine Voss's empire. Good people, mostly. Smart, competent, and every single one of them saw her as either a problem to manage or an asset to exploit. Here's what's going to happen, Elena said. The foundation grants get approved as I instructed. The merger proceeds on our original terms or we walk. And going forward, board meetings happen twice a month instead of weekly because most of what we discuss could be an email. You can't just, I can. I did. We're done here. Elena stood and walked out, ignoring the eruption of voices behind her. Let them argue. Let them panic. She'd spent 30 years doing exactly what they expected, and it had gotten her nothing but money and misery. Time to try something different. She took the elevators down to street level and stood outside the building, watching people rush past. The wind was sharp, cutting through her coat, but she didn't move. Somewhere in the city, Daniel was framing walls or hanging drywall or whatever construction workers did, getting his hands dirty, building something real. And she was standing outside a glass tower full of people who pushed money around and called it work. The contrast felt obscene. Elena's phone buzzed. James, what just happened? Patterson's furious. She typed back, let him be furious, I'm done performing. Then she turned off her phone and started walking. She didn't have a destination, didn't have a plan. Just moved through the city, letting the crowd carry her north on 6th Avenue. Past Bryant Park, where office workers sat on benches eating lunch despite the cold. Past the tourist trap stores selling I Love NY t-shirts and miniature Statue of Liberty replicas. Past everything that made the city both wonderful and terrible. Around 50th Street, Elena noticed a community center, one of those squat municipal buildings that looked like it had been there since the 70s. A sign outside advertised after-school programs, ESL classes, food distribution on Thursdays. On impulse, she walked inside. The lobby smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. A woman in her 60s sat behind a desk covered in flyers and intake forms, reading glasses perched on her nose. Help you? Elena realized she had no idea what she was doing here. I wanted to ask about volunteering. The woman looked her up and down, taking in the designer coat and expensive bag. We're always looking for help. You have any experience? No. Skills, teaching, counseling, administrative work? I run a finance company. So you're good with numbers. The woman pulled out a clipboard. Fill this out. We'll find something. Elena took the clipboard and sat in one of the plastic chairs bolted to the wall. The form asked for basic information, name, address, availability. Under why do you want to volunteer? Elena stared at the blank line for a long moment before writing, I need to remember what it feels like to help people. She turned in the form. The woman glanced at it, then looked at Elena with something that might have been understanding. We run a financial literacy program Tuesday nights, teaching people basic budgeting, how to read a credit report, that kind of thing. You interested? Yes? You sure? It's not glamorous. Mostly single parents and folks working 2 jobs trying to figure out how to not drown. Elena thought about Daniel counting out bills for coffee. I'm sure. Okay then. Next session's this Tuesday at 6. Don't be late. Elena left the community center feeling lighter than she had in weeks. It was a small thing, agreeing to teach basic finance to strangers. Probably wouldn't change anything. Probably wouldn't fix the empty space inside her. But it was something she could do with her hands instead of her checkbook. And maybe that was the point. Daniel was finishing up a wall frame when Marcus appeared next to him, looking amused. So you gonna tell me what's going on, or do I have to guess? What are you talking about? You've been weird all day, distracted, and you're never distracted. Daniel hammered in another nail. I'm fine. Uh-huh. This about Mia? No. Money? When is it not about money? Marcus laughed. Fair, but seriously, man, you okay? Daniel set down his hammer and wiped his forehead. The truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about the woman from the diner. Elena, who apparently had $12 billion and felt like her life was empty. He couldn't wrap his head around it. I met someone, Daniel said finally. Marcus raised his eyebrows. Yeah? Someone good? I don't know. She's complicated. Complicated how? She's rich, like stupid rich, and she wants to give me money or help me or something because I gave her a seat on the subway. And you said no. Of course I said no. Because you're an idiot. Daniel shot him a look. I'm not taking handouts. Man, if a billionaire wants to throw money at you, you take it. You use it to get Mia into a better school, pay off that hospital bill, maybe fix your damn jacket. Marcus gestured at the fraying sleeve. Pride's great and all, but it doesn't keep the lights on. It's not about pride, it's about… Daniel struggled to articulate it. I need to know I can take care of my kid. That I'm not just surviving because someone felt sorry for me. Nobody's going to think less of you for accepting help. I will. Marcus shook his head but didn't argue further. Your life, man. Just don't let stubbornness screw you over. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He'd been avoiding the bank account for 3 days, but ignoring it wouldn't make the numbers better. Checking $247.18. Savings $0. Credit card $3,842.67. The hospital wanted $800 immediately, or they'd send the account to collections. The landlord had left another notice about the late fee on March rent, and Mia needed new shoes. Her current ones had a hole in the sole she'd been trying to hide. Daniel closed the laptop and put his head in his hands. He was so tired of counting pennies, so tired of choosing between paying bills and buying groceries, so tired of feeling like he was one emergency away from complete collapse. And the worst part was knowing Mia saw it, saw him stressed and short-tempered and defeated. She was smart enough to understand they were struggling, even if she didn't know the details. Was Marcus right? Should he have taken Elena's offer? No, because accepting money from a stranger wasn't teaching Mia anything except that life could be bought. And that wasn't the lesson he wanted her to learn. The lesson he wanted her to learn was that you kept fighting, that you worked hard and took care of people and did the right thing even when it was hard, even when it felt impossible. Daniel opened the laptop again and logged into the hospital's payment portal. He transferred $150, more than he could afford, less than they wanted. It would buy him another month. Maybe. Then he closed everything and went to bed, knowing tomorrow would be exactly the same. Another day of barely making it. Another day of hoping that would be enough. And somewhere across the city, Elena Voss was probably in some penthouse apartment, surrounded by luxury she couldn't enjoy, wondering why money hadn't bought her happiness. Daniel almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then he thought about Mia's shoes with the hole in the sole, and the sympathy disappeared. Some problems really could be solved with money, even if he'd never admit it out loud. 3 weeks later, Elena showed up at Daniel's construction site. He was on the 3rd floor, installing drywall with Marcus, when Rick called up from below. "Hayes, you got a visitor." Daniel looked down through the open frame and saw her standing in the unfinished lobby, completely out of place in her wool coat and leather boots. She was holding 2 coffee cups and looking around like she'd just landed on another planet. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. Marcus peered over the edge. "That her? The billionaire?" "Yeah." "Damn, she's persistent." Daniel set down his drill and headed for the stairs. By the time he reached the ground floor, Rick was already grilling her. "This is a hard hat zone, ma'am. You can't just walk in here." "I'm sorry," Elena said. "I was looking for Daniel Hayes." "And you are?" "A friend." Rick looked skeptical but turned to Daniel. "This legit?" "It's fine," Daniel said, though it wasn't. "Give us a minute?" Rick shrugged and walked away. Daniel crossed his arms and waited. Elena held out one of the coffee cups. "Peace offering. How did you find me?" "I asked around. Turned out there aren't that many Daniel Hayes working construction in Brooklyn." She paused. "Are you going to take the coffee or just stare at me?" Daniel took it, mostly because his hands were cold. "What do you want?" "To talk. You haven't answered my calls." "I don't have your number. I left 3 messages at the diner. The waitress said she'd pass them along." Daniel had gotten the messages. He'd ignored them. "I told you I'm not interested in whatever you're offering." "I'm not offering anything. Not anymore." Elena looked uncomfortable, like she wasn't used to being the one asking for things. "I want to hire you. I have a job." "Not for construction, for consulting." Daniel almost laughed. "Consulting on what? Reality." She said it seriously, without irony. "I'm starting a community program. Financial literacy, job training, resources for single parents, but I don't trust myself to build it right. I need someone who actually knows what people need." "And you think that's me?" "I know it is. You're living it." The honesty of it caught him off guard. Daniel took a sip of coffee, good coffee, not the sludge from the diner, and tried to figure out her angle. There had to be one. People like Elena didn't do things without angles. "Why?" he asked finally. "Because the finance class I taught Tuesday went terribly. I spent an hour explaining compound interest to people who were more worried about making rent this month. Everything I said was technically correct and completely useless.
So you want me to tell you how to do it better?
Yes, and I'll pay you, not charity, consulting fees, market rate for your expertise. I don't have expertise, I'm just broke. You have exactly the expertise I need. You know what it's like to stretch a dollar, to make impossible choices, to raise a kid on nothing. Elena's voice softened. I can't learn that from a business school. Daniel wanted to say no. Every instinct told him to walk away from this woman, and her money, and her projects that would probably fall apart in 6 months. Rich people had hobbies. This was a hobby. But then he thought about that 150 he'd transferred to the hospital, how it hadn't been enough, how it would never be enough. And he thought about Mia, who deserved better than a father who was too proud to take opportunities when they appeared. How much? He asked. $50 an hour? 10 hours a week to start? More if the program scales up. Daniel did the math. $2,000 a month. That would cover the hospital bill with room left over for Mia's shoes and maybe fixing the heat in their apartment and actually having savings for emergencies. It felt too good to be true. What's the catch? No catch. You give me honest feedback on the program design. You tell me when I'm being an out-of-touch idiot. You help me build something that actually helps people instead of just making me feel better. And if I think the whole thing's a waste of time, then you tell me that too. Daniel studied her face, looking for the lie. But all he saw was exhaustion that matched his own and a desperate kind of hope that made her seem younger than she probably was. I need to think about it. Fair enough. Elena pulled a business card from her pocket and handed it over. My direct line. Call me when you decide. She left without waiting for a response. Daniel stood there holding the card, expensive cardstock, embossed lettering, her name and a phone number, and felt the weight of the decision pressing down. Marcus appeared at his shoulder. Please tell me you're going to say yes. I don't know. Man, it's $2,000 a month for talking. You'd be stupid not to. It feels like charity with extra steps. So what if it is? You going to let your pride starve your kid? Daniel pocketed the card without answering and went back to work. But the question followed him through the rest of the day, through picking Mia up from school, through dinner and homework and bedtime. That night, after Mia was asleep, he pulled out the card and stared at the number. $2,000 a month. He could pay off the hospital in 6 months, could start saving, could stop choosing between electricity and groceries, could give Mia the stability she deserved. His phone rang before he could talk himself out of it. This is Daniel. It's Elena. Did you decide? How did you know I was about to call? I didn't. I was just hoping. She paused. So? Yeah, I'll do it, but I have conditions. Name them. I'm not your employee. We're partners in this thing. Whatever it is. Equal say in decisions. Done. And if I think you're doing something stupid or wasteful, I'm going to tell you. No sugarcoating. I'm counting on it. And this ends the second it stops being about helping people and starts being about making you feel good about yourself. There was a longer pause this time. Fair. Anything else? Daniel thought about it. Yeah, I want my name kept out of any press or publicity. This isn't about me. Agreed. When can you start? Weekends, after I'm done at the site. Saturday morning? There's a space in the Lower East Side I'm looking at for the program. I'd like your opinion on it. Text me the address. He hung up and sat in the quiet apartment, wondering what he'd just agreed to. Partnership with a billionaire. Consulting on a program he had no qualifications to build. Getting paid to share opinions about his own poverty. It felt surreal, but it also felt like maybe, just maybe, something good could come from it. If he didn't screw it up first. The space Elena had found was a former community center on Delancey, empty for 5 years after budget cuts had shuttered the operation. The building was worn but solid. Good bones, terrible everything else. Water damage on the ceiling, graffiti on the walls, floors that needed refinishing. Daniel walked through slowly, testing door frames and checking outlets while Elena followed with a notepad. What do you think? She asked. I think you're looking at $60,000 in renovations minimum, maybe more if the electrical's as bad as I suspect. That's fine. What about the layout? Will it work? Daniel gestured to the main room. This could be your classroom space. You'd want to keep it open. People get nervous in cramped rooms. Makes them feel trapped. Why? Because most people coming here are going to be stressed already. Job loss, debt, eviction notices. They don't need another place making them feel small. Elena wrote that down. What else? Childcare. Daniel pointed to a smaller room off the main space. You want single parents to come. You need somewhere their kids can be while they're learning. Otherwise, they can't make it. I hadn't thought of that. That's why you hired me. They spent 2 hours going through the space, Daniel pointing out problems and solutions while Elena took notes. She asked good questions, not theoretical ones, but practical. How much seating? What kind of lighting? Should there be computers available? By the time they finished, the notepad was full and Daniel's coffee had gone cold. This is good, Elena said, reviewing her notes. This is really good. It's just common sense. No, it's perspective I don't have. She looked at him seriously. Thank you. Daniel shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. You're paying me. Still, this matters. They left the building and stood on the sidewalk in the late morning cold. The street was busy, weekend crowds hitting the shops and restaurants, tourists taking photos, normal city chaos. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Sure. Why did you say yes, really? Daniel thought about lying, about saying something noble about wanting to help people, but she'd hired him for honesty. Because I need the money, he said. And because maybe if I help build this thing right, my kid won't have to go through what I'm going through. That's a good reason. It's a selfish reason. All good reasons are a little selfish. That's what makes them sustainable. Elena pulled her coat tighter against the wind. Same time next week? Yeah, I'll put together a budget for the renovation. She nodded and started to walk away, then turned back. Daniel, for what it's worth, I'm glad you said yes. We'll see if you still feel that way when I start disagreeing with you. I'm counting on it. Over the next month, they fell into a rhythm. Daniel would spend his weekdays at the construction site, then meet Elena on Saturday mornings to work on the program. They renovated the space slowly, Daniel doing the labor himself on weekends to keep costs down, Elena writing checks without hesitation whenever materials were needed. She was different than he'd expected, less corporate, more willing to get her hands dirty. She showed up in jeans instead of designer clothes and helped him paint walls even though she was terrible at it. She listened when he talked about what actually helped versus what just looked good. And slowly, the program started taking shape. They called it Foundation. Simple, direct, no fancy branding. The curriculum focused on immediate needs, budgeting for people who live paycheck to paycheck, navigating social services, understanding predatory lending, building credit from nothing. Daniel insisted they run everything past people who'd actually need it. So Elena started bringing in focus groups, single parents from the neighborhood, people working multiple jobs, families one emergency away from homelessness. The feedback was brutal and necessary. This section on retirement savings is insulting, one woman said, pointing at the draft materials. I can't save for next month. You want me to think about 40 years from now? Elena started to defend it, then stopped and looked at Daniel. She's right, he said. Cut it. Focus on the next 3 months, not the next 30 years. They cut it. Another man challenged the job training component. You're teaching us how to write resumes. That's great. But who's going to hire someone with a felony record and a 6-month gap in employment? We could partner with companies that do fair chance hiring, Elena suggested. Could you? The man pressed. Or is that just something you're going to try? I'll have partnerships confirmed before we launch, Elena said. And if companies won't commit, we won't include them in the program. The man looked skeptical but nodded. After the focus group left, Elena slumped in a chair and put her head in her hands. I'm terrible at this. You're learning. I thought I could just throw money at the problem and fix it. Build a nice space, hire good teachers, done. That's how rich people always think. Is it working? Daniel considered it. It's working better than most things I've seen. Because you're actually listening when people tell you you're wrong. That doesn't feel like much. It's more than most people do. Elena looked up at him. Do you think this will actually help anyone? I think it'll help some people. That's better than helping nobody. But not everyone. You can't save everyone, Elena. You can just show up and try. She absorbed that in silence. Then, is that what you do? Just show up and try. Every day. It's all any of us can do. They sat in the half-finished space, surrounded by paint cans and drop cloths, and the slow progress of something taking shape. Outside, the city hummed along, indifferent to their efforts, but inside something was building that felt real, and that had to count for something. The program launched in April with 12 students, single parents mostly. A few people between jobs, one older woman trying to rebuild after a bankruptcy. Daniel sat in the back during the first class and watched Elena teach. She was nervous. He could see it in the way she gripped her notes, but she'd learned. No more compound interest lectures. Instead, she started with a simple question. What's the hardest choice you've had to make with money this month? The answers came slowly at first, then faster. Rent or my daughter's medication? Keeping the car running or buying groceries? Paying the electric bill or fixing my kids' broken glasses? Elena listened to all of them, wrote them down. Then she said, those are the problems we're going to solve. Not all at once, not perfectly, but we're going to figure out how to make those choices less impossible. One woman raised her hand. How? You got a magic money tree? No, but I have resources, and I have people here who've survived the same things you're surviving, and together we're going to build tools that actually work. It wasn't a perfect class. Some people left early, others looked doubtful, but a few, just a few, leaned forward and started taking notes. After everyone left, Daniel helped Elena clean up the space. How'd I do? She asked. Better. You didn't talk down to them. That's a low bar. It's a bar most people don't clear. Daniel stacked chairs against the wall. Give it time. They need to trust you first. Do you trust me? The question caught him off guard. Daniel thought about it, about the past month of working together, of Elena showing up consistently, of her listening even when the feedback hurt. Yeah, he said. I do. Which is weird because I didn't expect to. Why not? Because rich people don't usually care about people like me beyond tax deductions and photo ops. And I'm different? You're trying to be. That counts. Elena smiled, small but genuine. Thanks. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence. And for the first time since Sarah died, Daniel felt like he was building something that mattered beyond just survival. It felt strange, uncomfortable even, but also good. Then everything fell apart. The call came 3 weeks later while Daniel was at the construction site. A number he didn't recognize, but he answered anyway because it might have been about Mia. Is this Daniel Hayes? A woman's voice, official and cold. Yeah, who's this? I'm calling from the Administration for Children's Services. We've received a report regarding your daughter, Mia Hayes, and we need to schedule a home visit. Daniel's blood turned to ice. What kind of report? I can't discuss the details over the phone, Mr. Hayes, but we need to conduct an investigation into allegations of neglect. Neglect? That's insane. Who reported this? That information is confidential. We'll be at your residence tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please ensure you're available. She hung up before Daniel could respond. He stood there on the half-finished third floor, tool belt still on, phone still pressed to his ear, and felt his entire world tilting. Someone had reported him to child services. Someone had accused him of neglecting Mia, and they were coming to take her away. Marcus found him 20 minutes later sitting on a stack of lumber with his head in his hands. Hey man, you okay? No? Daniel's voice sounded foreign to his own ears. Someone called CPS on me. What? Why? I don't know. They wouldn't say. He looked up at Marcus. What if they take her? What if they decide I'm not good enough and they take my kid? They're not going to take her. You're a good dad. I'm a broke dad. I live in a crappy apartment. I work too much. I can barely afford to feed her half the time. That doesn't make you neglectful, doesn't it? Daniel felt panic rising. What if they look at our place and decide she deserves better? What if they're right? Stop. You're spiraling. But Daniel couldn't stop. 3 years of holding everything together, of fighting to be enough, and now someone, some stranger, had decided he wasn't, had made a call that could destroy everything, and he had no idea how to fight it. He called Elena that night after Mia was asleep. She answered on the first ring. What's wrong? Daniel hadn't realized he sounded that bad. Someone reported me to child services. They're investigating me for neglect. Silence. Then, when? They're coming tomorrow morning. Do you have a lawyer? I can't afford a lawyer. I'll handle it. I know people who specialize in family law. Good people. Elena, I can't. You're not paying for it. I am. And before you argue, this isn't charity. This is me helping my partner who's being attacked. Why would someone do this? I haven't done anything wrong. I don't know, but we're going to find out. Her voice was hard now, all business. Don't talk to the investigator without representation. I'll have someone there by 9 tomorrow morning. You can do that? Watch me. She hung up, and Daniel sat in the dark apartment listening to the radiator clank and the neighbors argue through the thin walls. Somewhere out there, someone wanted to hurt him, wanted to take Mia away, and he had no idea who or why. But for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't facing it alone, and maybe that would be enough to survive what was coming. Maybe. The lawyer arrived at 8:45 the next morning. Her name was Rachel Kim, mid-40s, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. She knocked on the apartment door with the kind of confidence that came from winning cases rich people paid her to win. Daniel opened the door with Mia hovering behind him, already dressed for school in the purple backpack she refused to leave behind. Mr. Hayes? I'm Rachel Kim. Elena Voss sent me. Yeah, come in. Daniel stepped aside, acutely aware of how small the apartment looked, how worn the furniture was, how the paint was peeling near the window. Rachel didn't seem to notice. She set her briefcase on the kitchen table and pulled out a legal pad. We don't have much time, so I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you ever hit your daughter? What? No, never. Left her alone for extended periods? She goes to Mrs. Chen next door if I'm running late from work. That's it. Drugs, alcohol, any substance abuse? No? Financial problems? Daniel hesitated. I'm not rich, but we're managing. Rachel wrote something down. The investigator is going to look for signs of neglect, lack of food, unsafe living conditions, inadequate supervision. Is there anything in this apartment that could be interpreted as problematic? Daniel looked around, trying to see the space through a stranger's eyes. The second-hand couch with the rip in the cushion, the dishes in the sink from breakfast, the expired inspection sticker on the smoke detector he kept meaning to replace. I don't know, he said quietly. Maybe everything. Daddy? Mia tugged on his sleeve. Are you in trouble? No, Bug. Just some people coming to check on us. Make sure we're doing okay. But we are okay. I know. They just need to see it for themselves. Rachel knelt down to Mia's level. Hey there, I'm Rachel. I'm here to help your dad. Can you do me a favor? Mia nodded. If anyone asks you questions today, just tell them the truth about what life is like here. Can you do that? Okay. Good girl. Rachel stood back up. Mr. Hayes, I need you to stay calm during this interview. Don't get defensive. Don't volunteer information they don't ask for, and absolutely do not lose your temper. These investigators are looking for red flags, and anger is a big one. I'm not angry. I'm terrified. That's understandable, but you can't show them that either. She checked her watch. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Let's go over what you're going to say. The investigator arrived exactly at 10. Her name was Patricia Ortiz, late 30s, carrying a clipboard and wearing an expression that gave nothing away. She introduced herself to Daniel, nodded at Rachel, then looked at Mia. You must be Mia. Yes, ma'am. I'm Ms. Ortiz. I work for the city, and I'm here to make sure you're safe and happy. Is that okay? Mia glanced at Daniel. He nodded. Okay, Mia said. Patricia pulled out a camera. I need to document the living space. Is that all right, Mr. Hayes? Rachel answered before Daniel could. That's fine. We have nothing to hide. Patricia spent 20 minutes photographing everything. The kitchen, the bathroom, Mia's bedroom with its second-hand furniture and drawings taped to the walls. She opened the refrigerator and made notes, checked the smoke detectors, ran water in the sink. Daniel stood there feeling like his entire life was being judged and found wanting. Finally, Patricia sat down at the kitchen table. Mr. Hayes, I need to ask you some questions. You have the right to have your attorney present. She's staying, Daniel said. Fine. How many hours a week do you work? 40 to 50. Construction. And who watches Mia while you're working? She's in school. After school, she goes to Mrs. Chen's apartment until I pick her up. Mrs. Chen is a licensed childcare provider? She's my neighbor. She's been helping out since my wife died. Patricia made a note. And you pay her for this service? Daniel felt his stomach drop. He gave Mrs. Chen what he could, $20 here, $40 there, groceries when he had extra, but nothing formal, nothing documented. I help her out when I can, he said carefully. So you have an informal arrangement with an unlicensed provider. She's a retired teacher who lives next door. She's known Mia since she was 4. That's not what I asked. Rachel cut in. Ms. Ortiz, informal childcare arrangements are common in this community. There's nothing illegal or negligent about a neighbor helping out. Patricia ignored her. Mr. Hayes, have you ever left Mia home alone? No. Not even for a few minutes? If I need to run to the store and she's asleep, Mrs. Chen checks on her. Otherwise, no. Does Mia have regular meals? 3 a day. Sometimes snacks if we have them. What did she eat for breakfast this morning? Daniel's mind went blank. He'd been so focused on the investigation that he couldn't remember. Had they eaten? They must have. Cereal, Mia said quietly, with milk, and I had an apple. Patricia looked at her. Do you always have enough food, Mia? Yes, ma'am. Does your daddy ever forget to feed you? No, he makes sure I eat even when he doesn't. Daniel closed his eyes. Wrong answer. Perfect, honest, terrible answer. Patricia wrote something down. Mr. Hayes, are you skipping meals? Sometimes I'm not hungry. Or you can't afford food for both of you. Rachel leaned forward. Ms. Ortiz, my client provides adequate nutrition for his daughter. If he occasionally prioritizes her meals over his own, that's a sign of good parenting, not neglect. That's your interpretation. The interview continued for another hour. Patricia asked about school, bedtime routines, medical care, discipline. She examined Mia for bruises or signs of physical abuse. She asked Mia if she felt safe, if Daddy ever yelled, if she had friends. Mia answered everything honestly, and with each answer, Daniel felt the walls closing in. Finally, Patricia stood. I have what I need for now. I'll be filing my report within 5 business days. Mr. Hayes, you'll receive notification of our findings. What happens then? Daniel asked. That depends on what the report says. If we find evidence of neglect, we'll work with you on a remediation plan. If we find the child is in immediate danger, we'll take emergency custody. The words hit like a punch. Emergency custody, taking Mia away. She's not in danger, Daniel said, fighting to keep his voice level. I love my daughter. I take care of her. I'm sure you believe that, Mr. Hayes, but love isn't always enough. She left without another word. Daniel stood there in the sudden silence, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath him. Rachel was packing up her briefcase, Mia was hugging his leg, and everything felt fragile in a way it never had before. What do we do now? He asked. We wait, Rachel said, and we prepare. I'm going to need documentation, pay stubs, rent receipts, anything that shows you're providing for Mia, references from teachers, neighbors, anyone who can speak to your parenting. And if the report says I'm neglectful, then we fight it, but let's not assume the worst yet. After Rachel left, Daniel called in sick to work and spent the day with Mia. They went to the park even though it was cold, got hot chocolate from the cart on the corner, sat on a bench and watched pigeons fight over breadcrumbs. Daddy, are they going to take me away? Mia asked. No, Bug. I won't let that happen. But that lady seemed mean. She's just doing her job, making sure kids are safe. I am safe. You keep me safe. Daniel pulled her close, breathing in the smell of her shampoo. I'm trying, baby. I'm really trying. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel sat on the floor of his bedroom with his phone in his hand. He should call Elena, tell her what happened. But he felt paralyzed by shame and fear and the crushing weight of inadequacy. His phone rang before he could decide. Elena. How did it go? She asked. Bad. Really bad. Daniel's voice cracked. She made it sound like I'm failing Mia, like loving her isn't enough. Tell me everything. So he did. The questions about meals and childcare and money, Patricia's cold assessment, the threat of emergency custody hanging over everything. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to find out who filed that report, she said finally. How? I have resources. Give me 48 hours. Elena, I don't want you getting in trouble. Someone attacked you, attacked your family. I'm not letting that slide. Why do you even care this much? Because you're my friend, and because this is exactly the kind of thing my mother would have done. Daniel didn't understand. What? Destroy someone for getting in her way. Make it look official and legal so no one questions it. I watched her do it my whole life. Elena's voice was hard. I know what this is, and I know how to fight it. I can't afford to fight anything right now. You're not paying. I am. Rachel's already on retainer. I can't keep taking your money. You're not taking it. I'm investing it in something that actually matters. She paused. Trust me, Daniel, please. He wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the pride that had kept him afloat for 3 years, but pride wouldn't keep Mia safe. Okay, he said. I trust you. Elena worked fast. Within 24 hours, she'd hired a private investigator. Within 48, she had answers. The report had been filed by someone claiming to be a concerned teacher at Mia's school. But when the investigator checked, no teacher by that name existed. The complaint had come from a burner phone paid for with cash, impossible to trace. But whoever filed it had detailed information about Daniel's schedule, his financial situation, even his arrangement with Mrs. Chen, someone close, someone watching. Elena called an emergency meeting at Foundation's office. Daniel arrived to find her pacing, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp with controlled fury. I don't care about protocol, Patterson. You're going to tell me why someone from Voss Capital filed a false CPS report, or I'm going to start digging through every email and phone record until I find out myself. She listened for a moment, then, that's not a denial, that's deflection. Try again. More silence. Elena's jaw tightened. So you admit someone in the company has been tracking Daniel Hayes. Interesting. She locked eyes with Daniel. You have until 5 p.m. to give me names, or I'm going to the board with this. And trust me, Richard, you don't want me doing that in my current mood. She hung up. What the hell is going on? Daniel asked. Someone at my company has been investigating you, following you, building a case to discredit you. Elena's hands were shaking. I think it's Patterson. The guy from your board? He's been trying to undermine me since I started changing how the company operates. Getting rid of the foundation's PR focus, actually helping people instead of just pretending to. He hates it. So he came after me? Why? Because you're connected to me. Because if he can prove you're an unfit parent who I'm throwing money at, it makes me look unstable, impulsive, not fit to run the company. Elena sat down heavily. I'm sorry. This is my fault. How is this your fault? I brought you into my world. I should have known there'd be consequences. Daniel felt anger rising, not at Elena, but at the faceless corporate executive who decided to use his daughter as a weapon. What can we do? Legally? Not much. The report was anonymous and technically filed in good faith. Even if we prove Patterson was behind it, there's no law against being concerned about a child's welfare. So he gets away with it. Not if I have anything to say about it. Elena pulled out her phone. I'm calling an emergency board meeting tonight. What are you going to do? End this. The board meeting happened at 7 p.m. in Voss Capital's executive conference room on the 42nd floor. Daniel wasn't invited, but Elena called him immediately afterward. It's done, she said. She sounded exhausted. What's done? Patterson's out. I forced a vote. He either resigned or I went public with evidence that someone in his department filed the false report. He chose resignation. Just like that? Just like that. Turns out he'd been embezzling foundation funds for years. Once I threatened to audit everything, he folded. Daniel tried to process this. So the CPS investigation. I can't make it disappear. Patricia still has to file her report, but I've hired experts to do a home study, character witnesses to testify on your behalf. When that report comes back, we'll have a mountain of evidence showing you're a good father. And if they still decide to take Mia, then we go to court. And I promise you, Daniel, I will spend every dollar I have making sure that doesn't happen. He believed her, which was somehow more terrifying than facing it alone had been. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over. But something had shifted. Daniel could feel it. For years, he'd carried everything alone. The grief, the fear, the impossible weight of being enough for Mia. And now someone was standing beside him, fighting battles he couldn't fight himself. It felt strange, vulnerable. But also, like, maybe he didn't have to be strong every single second of every single day. Maybe asking for help wasn't the same as giving up. The report came back 2 weeks later. Daniel opened the envelope with shaking hands while Rachel and Elena waited on speakerphone. He read it twice to make sure he understood. No evidence of neglect, he said finally. Some concerns about financial instability, but no evidence of neglect. He heard Elena exhale on the other end. Thank God. There's a note, Daniel continued. Says they'll do a follow-up visit in 6 months to ensure conditions remain stable, but Mia can stay with me. She was always going to stay with you, Rachel said, but this makes it official. Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. After they hung up, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with the letter in his hands. The words blurred as tears he'd been holding back for 2 weeks finally came. Mia was safe. His daughter was safe. He called Mrs. Chen and told her, called Marcus. Called the school to let them know everything was okay. Then he called Elena back. I don't know how to repay you, he said. You don't have to. I do, though. You saved my family. You would have done the same for me. Daniel thought about that. Would he? A month ago, probably not. A month ago, Elena had been just another rich person with more money than sense. But now she was the person who'd shown up when it mattered, who'd fought for him without expecting anything in return. She'd become his friend. Yeah, he said. I would have. They kept building foundation together. The program grew, from 12 students to 30, then 50. They added job placement services, legal aid referrals, even a small food pantry in the back room. Daniel brought in people from his neighborhood to help teach. Elena brought in funding and connections. Together, they made something real. One Saturday morning in June, Daniel arrived at Foundation to find Elena sitting on the front steps, staring at nothing. You okay? He asked. Patterson leaked everything to the press. The board meeting, the embezzlement, the false CPS report, it's all over the business section. Daniel sat down beside her. That's bad? It makes me look like I can't control my own company, like I'm more focused on charity projects than running a billion-dollar business. She laughed without humor. He's right, you know, I am. Is that a bad thing? According to the shareholders, yes. I had 3 investor calls this morning. They're worried I've lost focus. Have you? Elena thought about it. I don't think I lost focus. I think I found it. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters more than making money. So tell them that. It's not that simple. Why not? Because my mother built this company to be ruthless and efficient and profitable above all else. That's the legacy I inherited. And if I change it too much, I might destroy everything she worked for. Daniel looked at her. Would that be so terrible? What? Destroying something that was built on hurting people? Even if your mother built it. Elena didn't answer right away. They sat in silence, watching the neighborhood wake up. A man walked past with his dog. 2 kids raced by on bikes. Normal Saturday morning in a normal part of the city. I'm thinking about stepping down, Elena said quietly. From the company. Not from Foundation. From Voss Capital. Seriously? I can't do both. Not the way they both need to be done. And honestly, I don't want to spend my life in boardrooms anymore. I want to be here, doing this. Building things that help people instead of just moving money around. Your mother would hate that. I know, which is maybe how I know it's the right choice. Daniel nudged her shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you'd be good at it, this whole helping people thing. You think? You showed up for me when I needed it. You fought for my kid. You listened when I told you your ideas were terrible, and you fixed them. He paused. That's what good people do. Elena's eyes were wet. Thank you. For what? For reminding me who I want to be. A month later, Elena announced her resignation as CEO of Voss Capital. The press called it shocking. The board called it irresponsible. Her mother's old colleagues called it a betrayal of Catherine Voss's legacy. Elena called it freedom. She kept a seat on the board and enough shares to maintain influence, but handed operational control to a management team that could run the company without her. Then she threw herself into Foundation completely. Daniel watched her transform. The exhaustion that had lined her face that first morning on the subway gradually faded. She smiled more, laughed easier, seemed lighter in a way he couldn't quite define. She was becoming the person she'd been searching for. One evening in late summer, they were closing up foundation after a particularly good class when Elena's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's the hospital, the one that's been billing you." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Why are they calling you?" Elena answered, listened, then smiled. "Yes, this is Elena Voss. I'm calling about the outstanding balance for Daniel Hayes. I'd like to pay it in full." "Elena, no." She held up a hand. "Yes, the entire amount. Can you email me the details?" "Perfect. Thank you." She hung up. Daniel stared at her. "You can't just I already did. That's $4,800. And now it's $0. You're welcome." "I told you I don't take charity." "Good thing this isn't charity. It's me using my money for something that actually matters." Elena met his eyes. "You've given me more than you know, Daniel. Let me give you this." "I can't." "You can, and you will, because Mia deserves a father who isn't drowning in debt, and you deserve to breathe." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Thank you. Now say it without looking like I kicked your dog." He managed a smile. "Thank you. Better." They walked out together into the summer evening. The city was alive with noise and light, people heading home from work or out for the night. Normal chaos. Beautiful mess. "You know what's funny?" Elena said. "What?" "I spent my whole life thinking money was the answer to everything. And it turns out the only thing that actually mattered was giving someone a seat on a train. It wasn't just the seat. I know, it was you seeing me when I was invisible, being kind when nobody else was paying attention." She paused. It was the smallest thing, and it changed everything. Daniel thought about that day, how ordinary it had seemed, how forgettable. Just another morning, another commute, another stranger who needed help. He'd had no idea what that moment would become. "I'm glad I gave you the seat," he said. "I'm glad you did too." They parted ways at the subway station. Elena headed downtown to her apartment. Daniel headed uptown to pick up Mia from summer camp. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. And that was enough. 2 years later, Foundation occupied 3 buildings instead of 1. Daniel stood in what had been an abandoned warehouse in the Bronx and watched contractors install the last of the classroom partitions. The space would open in 2 weeks as Foundation North, serving families in neighborhoods that had been ignored by every other program in the city. His phone buzzed. "Elena. Board meeting ran late. Be there in 20. Daniel smiled and pocketed the phone. Board meetings for Foundation were different than the ones Elena used to attend at Voss Capital. Smaller, louder, full of people who'd actually used the services, arguing with people who ran them about what worked and what didn't. It was messy and inefficient and absolutely necessary. "Mr. Hayes?" One of the contractors waved him over. "We've got a problem with the electrical in the back room." Daniel spent the next 15 minutes troubleshooting wiring issues, grateful that his construction background actually mattered here. He'd left Rick's crew 6 months ago to work at Foundation full-time. The pay was less, but the work felt like it meant something. Plus, he got to see Mia more. That alone was worth the pay cut. Elena arrived while he was still elbow-deep in wire stripping. She'd traded her designer clothes for jeans and work boots permanently now, though Daniel suspected her coat still cost more than his car. "Electrical problems?" she asked. "When aren't there electrical problems?" Daniel stripped another wire. "How was the meeting?" "Productive. We got approval for the partnership with the school district. Starting next fall, Foundation classes will count for adult education credits." "That's huge." "It's a start." Elena grabbed a pair of work gloves from the supply box. "What can I help with?" They worked side by side for an hour, fixing wiring and installing fixtures. It had become their routine over the past 2 years, showing up together, building together, figuring things out as they went. The program had grown beyond anything Daniel had imagined that first morning in the diner. 3 locations, 200 students, partnerships with employers who actually hired people with gaps in their resumes or criminal records, a food pantry that fed 400 families a month, legal aid, childcare, job training. It wasn't perfect. They still lost people to evictions and emergencies and the brutal math of poverty, but they helped enough people that it mattered, and that had to be enough. I got a call from a reporter yesterday, Elena said, connecting a wire to the junction box. From the Times. They want to do a feature on Foundation. What'd you tell them? That we'd think about it. I wanted to ask you first. Daniel secured the cover plate. Why me? Because this is as much yours as it is mine. More, probably. You're the one who keeps it real. I just tell you when your ideas are stupid. Exactly. That's invaluable. Elena tested the light switch. It flickered, then held. So, what do you think? Press coverage could bring in more funding, more students. Or it could turn us into another feel-good story that rich people read over brunch and forget about by dinner. Cynical. Realistic. Elena laughed. Fair enough. So that's a no? Daniel thought about it. 2 years ago, he would have said no immediately. Hated the idea of being in the spotlight, of his story being used to make other people feel better about themselves. But Foundation wasn't his story anymore. It was bigger than him. Bigger than Elena. Let's do it, he said, but on our terms. They talk to the students, not just us. They show what people are actually building, not just the sob stories. Deal. They finished the electrical work and locked up for the night. Outside, the November cold had teeth. Daniel pulled his jacket tighter and started walking toward the subway. You want a ride? Elena asked. She'd kept the town car, though she rarely used it anymore. Nah, I'm good. Daniel, it's freezing. I like the train, gives me time to think. Elena fell into step beside him. Then I'll ride with you. They walked to the station in comfortable silence. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly industrial buildings and warehouses, not many people around this time of night. Their footsteps echoed off the concrete. Can I ask you something? Elena said as they descended the subway stairs. Sure. Do you ever regret it, saying yes to all this? Daniel swiped his MetroCard. Why would I regret it? Because your life got complicated. CPS investigation, corporate attacks, losing your old job. You could have just said no that day in the diner and none of it would have happened. They stood on the platform waiting for the train. A few other people scattered along the length of it. A nurse in scrubs, a couple of teenagers with headphones in, a man in a suit reading his phone. Normal New York, late at night. You know what I regret? Daniel said. I regret all the years I spent thinking I had to do everything alone. That asking for help meant I was failing. He looked at Elena. You showed me that wasn't true. So no, I don't regret it. Even the scary parts? Especially the scary parts. They meant something was changing. The train arrived and they boarded. It was mostly empty, so they sat across from each other near the doors. Elena looked tired but content in a way she never had during those first months. Mia's doing well, Daniel said. Straight A's this semester. And she wants to be a teacher now instead of a princess. That's a downgrade in the glamour department. But an upgrade in the helping people department. I'll take it. She takes after her dad. Daniel shook his head. She takes after her mom. Sarah was the one who believed people were fundamentally good. I just try to honor that. You honor it every day. The train rocked through the tunnel. Daniel watched the darkness blur past the windows, thinking about how much had changed since that morning 2 years ago. Mia was thriving. The hospital bill was gone. He had work that mattered, and a future that didn't feel like constant survival. And Elena had become one of the most important people in his life. What about you? He asked. Any regrets? Elena considered it. I regret not doing this sooner. Not walking away from my mother's company years ago, before I turned into someone I didn't recognize. You were never that person. Not really. How do you know? Because that person wouldn't have noticed me on the train, wouldn't have cared that a stranger looked tired. Daniel met her eyes. You were always in there. You just forgot how to let her out. Elena smiled. When did you become so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just paying attention. They rode in silence for a few stops. At 59th Street, a woman boarded, mid-20s, carrying grocery bags, looking exhausted in that specific way that came from working too many hours for too little pay. The train was crowded now, rush of people heading home from late shifts. Daniel glanced around and saw all the seats were taken. Without thinking, he stood up. Miss? He gestured to his seat. You can have this. The woman looked surprised. Oh, you don't have to. It's fine. I'm getting off soon anyway. It was a lie. He had 6 more stops. but the woman needed to sit more than he did. She smiled gratefully and took the seat. Daniel grabbed the overhead bar and caught Elena watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" he asked. "Nothing, just déjà vu." Daniel realized what he'd done and laughed quietly. "I guess some habits stick." "The good ones do." At 125th Street, they got off together. The platform was busy with people transferring between trains, the usual late-night crowd. They climbed the stairs to street level and stood on the corner where they usually parted ways. "Same time tomorrow?" Elena asked. "Yep, and I'll bring the electrical diagrams for the third classroom." "You're better at this than the contractors were paying." "Years of practice." Daniel hesitated, then, "Thank you for everything. You thank me at least once a week. You know that, right?" "Because it's true once a week." Elena hugged him, quick and tight and completely sincere. "Get home safe. Give Mia a hug for me." "Will do." Daniel walked the 4 blocks to his building. A new building, actually. They'd moved 6 months ago when the landlord at the old place had jacked up the rent beyond what Daniel could afford, even with his foundation salary. The new apartment was bigger, warmer, in a slightly better neighborhood. Mia had her own room now. That alone made it worth it. Mrs. Chen was waiting in the hallway when he arrived. She'd moved into the building a month after they did, said she wasn't letting her favorite people get away that easily. "She's already asleep," Mrs. Chen said, but she finished her homework first. Math and reading. "Thanks for watching her." "Stop thanking me, it's insulting." She smiled to take the sting out. "She's a good kid, makes it easy." After Mrs. Chen left, Daniel checked on Mia. She was sprawled across her bed with a book on her chest and her nightlight casting stars on the ceiling. He pulled the blanket up over her shoulders and kissed her forehead. She stirred. "Daddy?" "Yeah, bug. Go back to sleep." "Did you fix the building?" "Most of it. There's always something that needs fixing." "Like us?" Daniel sat on the edge of her bed. "What do you mean?" "You used to be sad all the time, but you're not anymore. Miss Elena helped fix that." Out of the mouths of children. "Yeah, she did." "Is she going to be around forever?" "I don't know about forever, but for a long time, I think." "Good. I like her." Mia yawned. "She's nice, and she thinks I'm smart." "You are smart." "I know, but it's nice when other people notice." Daniel smiled in the dark. "Get some sleep." "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, Bug." He sat there for a moment after she fell back asleep, watching her breathe in the gentle rhythm of childhood. This was what mattered, not the money or the program or the press coverage. This, right here, his daughter safe and loved and dreaming about whatever 9-year-olds dreamed about. Everything else was just noise. The Times article ran 3 weeks later. It was a 5-page spread with photos of Foundation's classrooms, interviews with students, and a profile of both Daniel and Elena. The reporter had actually listened when they said to focus on the people being helped instead of making it about saviors and charity cases. The headline read, "Building Community from the Ground Up, How One Subway Encounter Sparked a Movement." Daniel read it over breakfast while Mia ate cereal and asked why he was in the newspaper. "Because we're trying to help people," he said. "But you always help people." "Yeah, but now more people know about it." "Is that good?" "I think so." The article brought attention they hadn't expected. Donation requests poured in. Other organizations reached out about partnerships. Universities wanted to study their model. Politicians suddenly cared about what they were doing. It was overwhelming and exhausting and exactly what Foundation needed to grow. But it also brought something Daniel hadn't anticipated: his past. The email came on a Tuesday morning while he was reviewing job placement stats. An address he didn't recognize, a subject line that made his stomach drop. From Sarah's mother. Daniel stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Daniel, I saw the article about you in the Times. I'm proud of what you're doing, and I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. After Sarah died, I didn't know how to be around you and Mia without falling apart. I handled it badly. If you're willing, I'd like to meet Mia. She's my only grandchild, and I've missed so much. I understand if you say no, but I had to ask. Margaret." Daniel read it 3 times. Sarah's mother, who'd blamed him for the accident even though it hadn't been anyone's fault.
who'd said terrible things at the funeral and then disappeared from their lives completely. And now she wanted back in because she'd seen him in the newspaper. He forwarded the email to Elena without comment. She called immediately. "What do you want to do?" "I have no idea." "Do you want her in Mia's life?"
"I want Mia to know her grandmother, but I don't want her getting hurt if Margaret disappears again."
"Those are both valid concerns." Daniel rubbed his face. "What would you do?"
"I'd probably say no out of spite, but that's my mother issues talking."
Elena paused.
"What does your gut say?" "That people deserve second chances, even when they don't deserve them." "Then there's your answer." Daniel met Margaret 2 weeks later at a coffee shop in Midtown. She looked older than he remembered, grayer, thinner, worn down by grief that hadn't faded with time. They sat across from each other, both holding coffee. Neither of them drank. "Thank you for meeting me," Margaret said finally. "I'm not sure this is a good idea."
"I know, I wouldn't blame you if you walked out right now." She took a shaky breath. "I was cruel to you after Sarah died. I needed someone to blame, and you were there. It wasn't fair." "No, it wasn't. I've regretted it every day since, but I didn't know how to fix it, how to admit I was wrong." Margaret finally looked at him. "When I saw that article, saw what you've built, what you're doing for Mia, I realized I'd wasted 3 years being angry instead of being a grandmother."
"What changed?"
"Nothing changed. I just ran out of time to keep pretending it didn't matter." She pulled out her phone and showed him a photo. Mia, at 4 years old, laughing in a park. Sarah had sent it 3 weeks before the accident. "I look at this every day, and I think about how much I've missed." Daniel felt something crack in his chest. "She asks about you sometimes, about her grandmother." "What do you tell her?"
"That you loved her mom very much. That grief makes people do strange things."
"You're kinder than I deserve."
"Maybe. But Mia deserves to know her family." Daniel set down his coffee. "If you want to see her, you can, but you don't get to disappear again. You don't get to come in and out when it's convenient. She needs stability."
"I understand."
"And if you ever blame her or me for Sarah's death in front of her, we're done. Permanently." Margaret's eyes filled. "I won't, I promise." They started slowly. Supervised visits at the park, then dinner at Daniel's apartment with Mrs. Chen present. Margaret was awkward at first, trying too hard, but Mia's natural warmth gradually broke through the tension. After a month, Mia asked if Grandma Margaret could come to her school play. "You want her there?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, she's family." Such a simple statement, such a complicated truth. Margaret came to the play. Sat next to Daniel and Mrs. Chen and Elena, who'd taken the afternoon off to watch Mia perform as a talking tree in the 3rd grade production of a nature-themed musical no adult would remember 5 minutes after it ended. Afterward, Mia ran up to all of them, costume still on, beaming with pride. "Did you see me? I didn't forget any of my lines." "You were perfect," Margaret said, and Daniel heard the crack in her voice.
"Thanks, Grandma." Mia hugged her unselfconsciously. "We're getting pizza. You should come."
Margaret looked at Daniel. He nodded. They went to the pizza place down the street. Daniel, Mia, Margaret, Mrs. Chen, and Elena. An unlikely family built from grief and second chances and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other.
Mia sat between her grandmother and Elena, talking a mile a minute about the play and her friends and a book she was reading.
Margaret listened with the intensity of someone trying to memorize every word. Elena caught Daniel's eye across the table and smiled. He smiled back. This was it. This was the thing he'd been fighting for all along. Not perfection, not wealth or success or even happiness exactly. Just this. People showing up for each other, flawed and broken and trying anyway. Foundation continued to grow. By the 3rd year, they had expanded to 5 locations across 3 boroughs. Daniel had a staff of 12. Elena had stepped back from daily operations to focus on fundraising and partnerships, and the program was helping over 500 families at any given time. It still wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Poverty was bigger than any program, any amount of money, any single person's effort. But it was something. One morning in early spring, Daniel arrived at Foundation's main office to find a crowd gathered outside. Students, former students, volunteers, people from the neighborhood. What's going on? He asked Marcus, who'd started volunteering after Daniel left the construction crew. You haven't seen the news? What news? Marcus handed him a phone. The headline read, Foundation Program Model Adopted Citywide, Mayor Announces Partnership for Financial Literacy in All 5 Boroughs. Daniel read the article in stunned silence. The city was taking their curriculum, their approach, their entire model, and scaling it up. Funding from the mayor's office, support from the school district, real institutional backing. Did you know about this? He asked Marcus. Elena's been working on it for 6 months. She wanted it to be a surprise. Daniel looked up and saw Elena pushing through the crowd toward him. She was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. Surprise, she said. You're insane. You say that like it's a bad thing. We don't have the capacity to go citywide. Not yet, but we will. The city's providing funding for staff training, facility expansion, everything we need. Elena grabbed his hands. Daniel, this is what we've been working toward. Real systemic change. What if we screw it up? Then we'll fix it, together, like we always do. The crowd around them started clapping. Daniel looked at all the faces, people who'd come through the program, people who'd taught classes, people who'd volunteered because they believed in what Foundation was building. His throat went tight. Speech, someone called out. No way, Daniel said. Speech, speech, Elena nudged him. They want to hear from you. I don't do speeches. You do now. Daniel took a breath and turned to face the crowd. Dozens of people looking at him expectantly, waiting for wisdom he didn't have. I'm not good at this, he started. You're doing fine, someone shouted. 3 years ago, I gave someone a seat on a train. That's it. That's all I did. And somehow it turned into all of this. He gestured at the building, the people, everything Foundation had become. I don't have any big wisdom about why it worked, but I think it's because we stopped treating poverty like something to fix and started treating people like people. We listened. We adapted. We built something together instead of for each other. The crowd was quiet now, really listening. This citywide thing is huge. It's terrifying. And honestly, I have no idea if we can pull it off. But I know we're going to try. Because that's what we do. We show up. We work hard. We help each other. And we don't give up just because something's difficult. He paused, gathering his thoughts. My daughter asked me once why I care so much about helping strangers. And I told her it's because strangers aren't strangers once you actually know them. They're just people trying to get through the day, same as us. And if we can make that a little easier for each other, then we should, always. Someone started clapping, then everyone was clapping. Daniel felt his face heat up and stepped back quickly. Okay, that's enough. Everyone back to work. The crowd dispersed slowly, people stopping to shake his hand or thank him. Daniel made his way inside where it was quieter and less overwhelming. Elena followed. That was good. That was terrible. You inspired people. I embarrassed myself. Both can be true. She sat on the edge of a desk. You know what I realized while you were talking? What? That you've been teaching me how to be a decent person this whole time, and I didn't even notice. Daniel laughed. You were already decent. You just forgot for a while. Maybe, but you reminded me. Every day, just by being who you are. Elena looked at him seriously. I know I say this too much, but thank you for taking a chance on this. On me. Stop thanking me. Never. They stood there in the quiet office, two people who'd started as strangers and become something neither of them had expected. Not quite family, not quite friends. Something in between that didn't have a name but mattered more than most things that did. We should get to work, Daniel said finally. Citywide expansion doesn't plan itself. One more thing first. Elena pulled an envelope from her bag. This came for you yesterday. Daniel opened it. Inside was a letter from Mia's school and a photograph. The letter said Mia had been selected for an advanced academic program starting in the fall. The photo showed her receiving a certificate, beaming with pride. She didn't tell me about this, Daniel said quietly. She wanted it to be a surprise. She's proud of you, you know, talks about you all the time. Daniel stared at the photo of his daughter, 9 years old, confident, thriving. So different from the scared 4-year-old who'd lost her mother and didn't understand why Daddy was so sad all the time. I'm proud of her too, he managed,
I know you are.
The day Mia turned 10, they threw a party at Foundation. Not a big production, just cake and balloons and the people who mattered. Mrs. Chen came. Marcus and some of the other volunteers. Margaret, who'd become a regular presence in their lives. A few of Mia's school friends. And Elena, who showed up with a present that made Mia's eyes go wide.
A laptop? Really? For schoolwork, Elena said. And maybe some games, educational games. Thank you. Mia hugged her tightly.
Daniel caught Elena's eye and mouthed too much. She mouthed back, "Deal with it." They ate cake and watched Mia open presents and sang off-key birthday songs. Normal family chaos. Beautiful, ordinary moments. After everyone left and Mia was asleep in the car on the way home, Margaret spoke quietly from the back seat. "Sarah would be so proud of her. Of both of you." Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, she would. I'm sorry I missed so much time. You're here now. That's what matters." When they got home, Daniel carried Mia up to bed without waking her. He tucked her in carefully and stood there for a moment, watching her sleep. 10 years old, double digits, growing up too fast and exactly fast enough. His phone buzzed. "Elena, good party. Your kid is awesome." Daniel, "She gets it from her mom." Elena, "She gets some of it from you too, whether you admit it or not." He smiled and pocketed the phone. 3 years since that morning on the train. 3 years since he'd given up a seat and accidentally changed both their lives. It felt like longer. It felt like no time at all. The work continued. Foundation grew and stumbled and adapted and grew again. They made mistakes, fixed some, lived with others, helped people who wanted help, and watched others slip through cracks they couldn't fill. It was imperfect and messy and exactly what it needed to be. 5 years after that first subway ride, Daniel stood on a platform at 72nd Street, waiting for the morning train. The station looked the same tile, same smell, same crowd of tired commuters heading to jobs they may or may not love. The train arrived. Daniel boarded and found a seat near the door. Across from him, a woman in her 30s stood gripping the pole, looking exhausted in a way he recognized immediately. The train was crowded. Every seat was taken. Daniel stood up.
"Miss, you want to sit?" She looked startled. "Oh, I'm okay. You look like you've had a long night. Please." She hesitated, then smiled gratefully. "Thank you." Daniel grabbed the overhead bar and watched as she sat down, shoulders sagging with relief. He didn't know her story, didn't know if she was coming from or going to something difficult, but he knew that small kindnesses mattered. They always had. At the next stop, a younger guy who'd been watching stood up and offered his seat to an older man with a cane. The man accepted with a nod of thanks. Daniel caught the younger guy's eye. They both smiled, acknowledging the small chain reaction. One person helps another, who helps another, who helps another. It wasn't going to solve poverty or fix broken systems or change the world overnight, but it was something, and sometimes something was enough to start with. Daniel rode the train to his stop, then walked to Foundation's main office, where Elena was already waiting with coffee and a list of problems that needed solving. They got to work. Together. The way they always did. Because in the end, that was the only lesson that really mattered. You show up for people. You help when you can. You build things together instead of alone. And you never underestimate the power of small kindnesses. Even ones as simple as giving someone a seat on a crowded train. Especially ones that simple. Because you never know what they might become.